Bret Hart versus the 1-2-3 Kid from the July 11th, 1994 episode of Raw. This is a match I've wanted to talk about for a very long time, but I was getting the impression that some viewers were getting a little tired of the consistent Bret Hart uploads on the channel, so I put it on the back burner and focused on other stuff. But after watching it again for like the 100th time this past week, I felt that now's the right time to discuss what many believe is the greatest Raw match in WWF history. Not too long ago, I looked at Paul Roma vs Alex Wright, a match where Paul was instructed to make Alex look as good as possible, and Paul decided he wasn't gonna do that. Well, Bret Hart vs Kid gives us the absolute prime example of a superstar making his opponent look good. It's a masterful piece of work that constantly builds and builds to the point that by the last few minutes, the underdog doesn't look like an underdog anymore, and the veteran finds himself in a lot of trouble. The story's all contained in the ring. You don't need to follow wrestling for a single moment to clearly understand what's going on. The pace of the match completely fits the purpose of the match, and the cherry on top is having two highly proficient superstars in there giving it their all to turn a Raw opening match into a legendary battle that would become remembered for years afterwards. This is Bret the Hitman Hart versus the 1-2-3 Kid. As we normally do when covering specific matches, let's set the scene and check out where both guys were before meeting in the ring. In the summer of 1994, Bret Hart was in the middle of his second WWF title reign, having defeated Yokozuna at WrestleMania 10 to reclaim the championship. At the same WrestleMania show, however, Bret was also defeated clean by his little brother Owen Hart, and not only is this significant because it kept the Bret vs Owen feud pretty hot throughout 1994, but it also showed us that Bret Hart was still beatable. Brother Owen was coming after Bret's championship. He defeated his brother at WrestleMania, and he knew he could defeat him again when the championship was on the line. To prove a point, Owen won the King of the Ring in 1994, and he proclaimed himself as the King of Hearts, and he also won the tournament to show that anything Bret could do, little brother Owen could do better. A WWF title match was then made official between Owen and Bret at the upcoming SummerSlam 1994 event held in Chicago, Illinois. So Bret's main rival at this point in time is his own flesh and blood. Bret may have been the WWF champion, but in storyline anyway, Owen posed a real threat to the Hitman, seeing as the King of Hearts was on quite a roll in 1994. The 1-2-3 Kid debuted in WWF shortly after WrestleMania 9, and he had a well-documented storyline with Razor Ramon that helped with how fans perceived him in the company. Sean Waltman wasn't a random enhancement guy. His work with Jerry Lynn in promotions such as GWF in Dallas and UWF in Japan were received very well, with 2 GWF matches making it to TV through ESPN. So it is a disservice to Sean to say he was an underneath guy, although the WWF certainly painted him this way during his very first matches in the company. The Razor Ramon feud changed that perception though, and the WWF got themselves a new star in Sean Waltman thanks to the work he and Scott did in 1993. But things seemed to quiet down for the Kid following a defeat at SummerSlam that year. Kid wrestled IRS at this event in the second shortest match on the card, and it does feel like a misstep by the company when you consider some of the other matches at SummerSlam that year. But nonetheless, Waltman himself stated that he felt his push wasn't as strong following the IRS match, and while he was still featured on TV, it wasn't necessarily in the best way possible. He and Marty Jannetty defeated the Quebecers to capture the WWF Tag Team Championships on the January 10th, 1994 episode of Raw, but they dropped the belts back to Jacques and Pierre just 7 days later at a house show in New York. Kid also didn't get featured at WrestleMania 10 due to his 10-man tag match getting cancelled due to time constraints, but things started looking a little brighter when Kid met Owen Hart in the 1994 King of the Ring semi-finals. Kid vs Owen was a great match, and some may see it as another gem hidden in broad daylight. It's a very fast and technically sound matchup, but it only went for just under 4 minutes. Remember though, it's a King of the Ring semi-final, and it wasn't uncommon for tournament matches to get rushed out the door in order for a more complete final match to occur on the same night. But there was definitely something there when Owen and Kid stepped in the ring. These two were great together. It's the most action-packed 4-minute match you'll ever see. They pack in a pretty brutal baseball slide, a suicide dive, a top rope splash, a moonsault, a senton from the ring to the outside, a spinning wheel kick capture into a German suplex, a Hurricane Rana powerbomb reversal, and tons more before Owen wins with a sharpshooter. Seriously, if you haven't watched this one before, then go check it out. It only takes a few minutes of your time anyway. The 1-2-3 Kid was great in the ring, but with the right highly skilled opponent who could keep up with him, the Kid was excellent in the ring. So let's bring in the excellence of execution and find out how good Sean Waltman could really be. On the episode of Raw that immediately followed King of the Ring, the 1-2-3 Kid defeated Nikolai Volkov, and this would lead to Kid getting a televised title shot against Bret the Hitman Hart. So Kid's just coming off that loss to Owen at King of the Ring as he heads into Raw to face Bret Hart. The Hitman, meanwhile, is gearing up to defend his WWF title against Owen very soon on pay-per-view. Raw opened up that night with a clip of Bret praising Kid at the Hall of Fame ceremony, saying that Kid would be a guy who carried the torch for WWF in the future, and how Bret looks forward to following Sean's career from this point on. Our commentators for this match are Jim Ross and Macho Man Randy Savage. There's a version of this match that includes commentary from Jim Ross and Stan Lane, and you really don't want to watch that one. Even Sean Waltman mentioned that the alternative version suffers due to Stan Lane trying to crack jokes, and he's absolutely right. But if you're curious, for whatever reason, you'll find it on the WWF Raw Hits video.
There's enough pink in the ring to have a baby shower. You're looking around and checking out all these good-looking girls at ringside, and you thought about the Heartbreak Kid, didn't you, Ross? As a matter of fact, the weight of the kid is written on his back. So he was an unwanted baby, you know. His bath toys were a radio and an electric toaster.
Jim Ross and the Macho Man are phenomenal on commentary during the original broadcast, and they absolutely 100% make the match better, which a good commentary team should do anyway. The competitors get in the ring. Owen Hart and Jim Neidhart show up before the match begins, with Owen complaining that his big brother's scared to face him, but referee Erd Hebner sends the heels away and our match can now begin. We get a friendly handshake from Bret and Kid before the initial lockup, and Kid starts it off with an arm drag takedown. Bret's expression afterwards says a lot. He's surprised, but at the same time he's like, alright, not bad. Bret gets to his feet and he invites Kid in for a test of strength. There's a bit of delay in here and Bret's being slightly hesitant when Kid agrees to go for it, but then Bret suckers his opponent in and he applies a wrist lock. Veteran stuff that's supposed to show Kid's inexperience, but then Kid immediately counters it and Bret's the one on the canvas. Kid transitions into an armbar, the Hitman gets to his feet. Waltman takes a body slam with Bret more or less saying, well, I'm bigger than you and there's nothing you can do about that. But to show Bret that he's in for a fight, the Kid kips up. The 1-2-3 Kid isn't going to make this easy for the Hitman. Again, the Kid shows he knows a hold or two by switching from a side headlock to a hammerlock. Bret thinks he can snapmare Kid to break that hammerlock, but Kid holds on and now Bret's on the mat, a worse position than what he was in before. When the two get up though, Bret gives Kid a wake-up call with a hard back elbow, and it's almost like Bret's reminding his opponent of exactly who he's in the ring with. Bret snapmares the 1-2-3 Kid and he performs a chin lock. They get to their feet where Bret puts Kid down again with a shoulder block, but the challenger gets up. Kid leapfrogs the champion. Bret then takes a monkey flip and Kid does not give Bret a chance to catch his breath. The 1-2-3 Kid hits a reverse enziguri on Bret and the Hitman takes a jumping back kick that hits him square on the nose. Bret falls out of the ring and then Raw takes a commercial break. It's annoying that this whole match hasn't been released uncut. The only other time it was officially released was on that WWF Raw Hits video with the awful commentary, but Waltman said he once owned a copy of this match in its entirety with no commentary and no cuts. So please, WWE, the next time you want to celebrate a Raw anniversary or something like that, look through your video library and upload this one to the network. It's considered one of, if not the best match in Raw history, so you'd think they would share the whole thing, you know? Anyway, we come back to Bret locked in an armbar. Bret gets up, but he can't free himself from the hold due to Kid rolling through after an arm drag. But take a close look at Bret here. He knows Earl Hebner's right in front of the hard camera, so he tells Earl to move out of the way so the cameras can maintain a good shot of the hold. We're dealing with an absolute professional here, ladies and gents. The two get up again, and this time Kid goes down after a knee to the gut, the old kitchen sink. Bret then kicks Kid in the midsection before hitting a body slam and a quick leg drop, and the Hitman watches as this Kid crawls on his hands and knees on the mat. It goes to the corner where Bret lays in a few hard European uppercuts, and according to Waltman, Bret complimented Kid on how he took these shots. Waltman said it wasn't hard to sell these at all. Clearly though, Bret's getting a bit vicious on the challenger. He smashes Kid's head into his knee, he drops an elbow across the back of Kid's neck, he even kicks the 1-2-3 Kid when he's down, and this makes a few fans in attendance boo the Hitman. Kid then takes a swinging neckbreaker, he finds himself in another chin lock courtesy of the champion, and in the corner the 1-2-3 Kid again finds himself getting kicked and taking more European uppercuts. He then takes a ridiculously hard Irish whip into the opposite corner, and it almost looks like Bret feels sorry for his opponent. He looks down as Hebner asks Kid if he wants to give it up, but Waltman says no and the match is going to continue. Kid gets sent into the ropes, he manages to duck a back elbow, he then hits Bret with a crossbody, and again look at Bret when he kicks out. It's like he's annoyed that he's letting himself get caught out all the time. The Hitman's a bit more careful when his opponent goes for a sunset flip in the corner. A counter sees Bret almost win the match by pinfall. The Hitman tries to end it by countering a crucifix pin with a Samoan drop. Bret covers Kid, Earl counts Kid's shoulders to the mat, the bell rings, and Bret Hart's music plays in the arena. But the Kid had a foot on the bottom rope. Bret isn't going to accept this victory. A heel would have gladly taken this win and went about his day, but Bret won't have it. Even if Kid has caught him off guard a few times, he still wants to give this guy a fair shot. Tim White tells Hebner that he got it wrong. Hebner explains that the ruling could be final if Bret wants to take the win, but Bret says no. Hardfinkel announces that the match is going to continue at Bret's request just before another commercial break. During the break, Kid tried to pin Bret when Bret wasn't ready. During the double feature, we also saw Bret perform a double underhook suplex, which is a move he doesn't perform too often. We then see chinlock number 3, and those of you who watch Reliving the War would usually expect a giant explosion right here, but let's keep things civil. The Kid looks like he's absolutely done at this point, but the crowd are now firmly behind the underdog, and you gotta remember that this is Bret Hart in 1994. Seeing and hearing a crowd cheering for one of Bret's opponents was very uncommon during this time frame. The audience chants 1, 2, 3 as Kid gets up and he tries to catch Bret out with a backslide. Hart makes Kid pay with an elbow drop followed by a leg drop. The crowd then start chanting "Let's go Bret" as the Hitman performs a DDT. Bret lets Kid crawl on the mat a little just to emphasize how beaten up the challenger is right now before delivering a body slam, and then Bret goes for the second rope elbow drop, but the Kid gets a boot up. You'd think that this was Kid's time to shine and build towards a comeback, but no. Bret furiously marches over to Kid so he can kick him in the ribs, and this seems to wake the challenger up a little. Bret shoots Kid off the ropes and Waltman hits another spinning back kick after ducking a clothesline. The Hitman then gets thrown in the corner where the 1, 2, 3 Kid pulls off his kick combo, the last kick hitting Bret right on the jaw. Bret then takes a drop kick at the opposite side of the ring that looks fantastic, and now the 1, 2, 3 Kid's all fired up. He feels like he's in with a real chance here. Waltman performs a crossbody off the top rope that only gets a 2. He then delivers a falling powerbomb before heading to the top rope for a diving leg drop. When you're watching this part back, pay attention to Jim Ross's commentary. His excitement on the headset is very, very contagious. Bret kicks out a 2, so Kid sends the champion out of the ring before climbing upstairs for a diving senton to the outside. The move connects. Both guys are now absolutely spent, but they climb back into the ring for Kid to try another top rope senton. Unfortunately, this one misses, and Macho says the Kid just went to the well one too many times. Bret tries to lock in a sharpshooter, but Kid's too close to the bottom rope, so Bret gets a little serious. He hits Kid with another stiff European uppercut. He then sets Kid up for a superplex, but Kid shows he's not out of it yet by performing a crossbody counter, and again Bret's in disbelief that this guy somehow keeps coming back for more. This time though, it's Kid who stays on Bret, and it's Kid who marches over to kick Bret while he's down. His corner attack completely misses though when Bret moves out of the way. The crowd's at an absolute fever pitch as the Hitman performs a bulldog, but then Kid stops Bret from jumping off the top rope by slamming him on the mat. This is it. This is the kid's last chance to claim the WWF Championship and pull off the biggest upset in WWF history. He climbs the ropes, he goes airborne, but Bret Hart catches Kid out and the Hitman applies the sharpshooter. There's nowhere for Kid to go and there's nothing he can do at this point to escape, so he gives it up and Bret Hart wins via submission. The crowd applaud both men as Jim Ross calls this the greatest match he's seen so far in his career. Bret doesn't take his belt from Hebner. Instead, he's more concerned about Kid, who undoubtedly had the best match of his career this night on Raw. Even Waltman says this is still his greatest ever bout, and I'd agree with him. Both men were great on this night, not just Bret. Macho and Jim Ross give the competitors a standing ovation. Bret applauds Kid as Waltman gets to his feet. The two competitors share a hug in the ring, and Bret tells Shawn that the Kid just kicked all sorts of ass tonight. Bret raises Shawn's hand in the air like the 1-2-3 Kid just won the match, and that's it over. An absolute timeless classic that I can't get sick of watching. What we got here was the classic Rocky 1 story. The underdog gets a shot at the big time, but he's got the best in the world right in front of him. Overcoming the odds isn't expected. Maybe the challenger himself doesn't feel like he's gonna win either, but he's gonna give it his absolute best, and maybe, just maybe, he could pull off something that's impossible. Just like the first Rocky movie, the challenger doesn't succeed in his mission, but he gains a ton of admiration for his efforts, and he still comes out looking like a winner even though the record books state otherwise. To this day, Sean Waltman appreciates what Bret Hart did on this night. It's clear that Bret liked Waltman's work and he wanted to raise Sean's stock as a professional wrestler. And indeed, a lot of people looked at the 1-2-3 Kid in a very different light following this contest. In his book, Bret Hart called this match an example of the true art of wrestling, and coming from someone so revered as Bret Hart, it's probably the highest compliment Sean could ever hope for. Keep in mind too, this was an opening match on Raw, not a main event pay-per-view match, not a mid-card pay-per-view match, the opening match on a 1-hour telecast of WWF Monday Night Raw in 1994. It's unbelievable. It's also the one and only Sean Waltman versus Bret Hart match that ever happened, so if this is what they could do without knowing each other too well inside the ring, could you imagine what they could do after having 2 or 3 matches together? It's criminal that the full unedited match still hasn't been released to the public, but at least we can still hope for that to happen one day. We won't ever get a chance to see a Hart vs Kid rematch though, and the fact that these two didn't have a series of matches in 1995 is even worse than the full original match sitting dormant in the WWE video library. The Kid vs Bret Hart match has become pretty popular around the internet, and it's transcended from hidden gem status to a bona fide wrestling classic. Even guys in the business have praised the match, and some have even went a step beyond and paid tribute to the match by recreating spots. There's no better example than the CM Punk vs Darby Allin match from AEW All Out 2021, where the guys in the ring went through 4 or 5 Kid vs Hart spots, including the arm drag and surprise look, the roll through on the snapmare, the kitchen sink, and the senton to the outside. You'll notice Punk playing the role of Bret Hart and Darby's underdog in it is the 1-2-3 Kid. And if you've got guys paying tribute to the Raw match all these years later, then it just proves that the original left a lasting impression on fans and pro wrestlers alike. Imitation is the most sincere form of flattery. But your homework assignment for today is to check out Bret Hart vs the 1-2-3 Kid in its entirety and look out for the nuances of the match. Watch Bret Hart's reactions, watch the Kid selling, watch these two take a simple story and turn it into an all-time masterpiece in storytelling, the true art of wrestling. Thanks for watching guys, and take care.